All right, what's up guys? Rick from DFS On Demand here, and this video is a little bit different. So I'm going to attempt to show you how I do research on a daily basis for the NBA. Before I do that, let me say, as you can probably tell, I'm in a new spot. So I moved into my new place. I'm in a very empty room right now. So if this is a little bit echoey, I apologize. It'll be better moving forward. I'll get it fixed, so bear with me. All right, let's do this. One of the biggest questions that I get on a nearly daily basis is someone asking how I should use the tools on the website, on my website, which is dfsondemand.com. They've changed a lot over the course of the last even couple weeks, but just from the time I originally started, these have changed a lot. So I'm going to show you how I use these tools in my research process. I've gotten completely away from basically any other sites, and I've built these all myself. They're available on DFS On Demand. If there's something that you'd like to see different, let me know, because I'm out here building them. So let's do something cool. So basically, I can go to today's tools here. I'm just going to start with the cheat sheet. This is really the first place that I'm going to go every morning, and what I'm going to be able to look at is tonight's games with a lot of different items going on here. So let me actually just spread these out a little bit. All right, so here's what we can do. So upper left-hand corner, there's 5 games today, so that's what you're seeing here. If it was a larger slate, you'd obviously see more games or less games. Right here, this is kind of the meat of it down here in the bottom left-hand corner. These are the projections, right? So these are taking into account the projected minutes that each player is going to play tonight, which is right here, how many points, rebounds, assists, etc., that they're going to tally. Additionally, it also includes the defense that they're playing. It also includes the pace. It also includes the Vegas line. So a lot of different things come in here to give you a projection. Literally just sorted by projection. I can sort by the most expensive players, all that good stuff here. And these are designed to update throughout the day. So the projected minutes is the thing that changes the most throughout the day with breaking news. I think right now I have it scheduled it updates every hour until like the 2 hours before tip-off, and then it'll start to update more frequently. So those last-minute injuries are still being tallied here. You can download these, so I've included just a download button where it literally pumps it out into a CSV file, exactly what you're looking at here if you want to manipulate them yourselves. The next one is basically it takes these projections and the players' salaries tonight and basically says, here are the top projected values. So this is really handy for filling out lineups. If it'll take into account how many how many fantasy points a player is projected for, their salary for tonight, and then assigns them a value. So Wilson Chandler projected to come in at nearly 6 times value. So this is kind of handy, especially later in the evening or before tip-off, to see what really jumps out here. So that's nice. And then I like to look at this. Recently, I've gotten more into kind of stacking teams or stacking games. One, you get the benefit of if that game goes to overtime. 2, basketball is very much a team sport. Guys are assisting on other players' baskets. There's a lot of things that can happen here. So I just like to have, basically, this is the average fantasy points scored by each player on each team who play at least 20 minutes. So I didn't want to include the bench players and skew the data. So I drew 20 minutes as the line here. And then, no real surprise that Golden State is number 1, but then you see New Orleans and Washington coming in 2nd and 3rd. And it's just something that I like to keep an eye on. I mean, Philadelphia's up here. I mean, you get Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid. So this is kind of a way for me to look and say, okay, if I want to stack starters or guys who play a lot, like 20 minutes, these might be some good teams to look at. So just kind of for me, it's a daily reminder of who the really high-powered offenses are. And I like that if you're going to go the stacking route. And then on the right-hand side here, this is just the points allowed by position chart. This is something that I like, I don't love, but I know that you guys like it, so I've kept it and I keep it updated. Basically just every team and how many fantasy points they give up per position. The problem with this is that basketball is becoming increasingly positionless. So while LeBron James will tally points as a small forward, there's going to be a lot of minutes throughout the game he's going to play point guard, or he's going to play center, depending on what lineup they roll out. So a lot of teams are kind of going that route. LeBron is the extreme example, but this chart, to me, I like it for more traditional positions like point guard and center. The other ones start to blend a little bit too closely for my liking, but I'm coming up for a better solution for this. I got a couple things in mind, but it's still a pretty handy chart to look at least for point guard. Like the Lakers are always so bad defending point guards, but this is going to be the first place that I start every day. I'm looking for values. I'm looking for players who are projected highly. I'm looking for what teams are available to stack, and then if there's just anything else that jumps out at me. So this is the absolute first place that I start, and then I'll move on to some of the other tools when I find some players that might be of interest. Okay, I almost forgot to show you the one of my favorite things about the cheat sheet, which is something I added a couple days into the season. So a lot of these interactive data tools, they have multiple tabs to them. So if you come down here to the bottom, I don't know if you can see it, it says one of two, but I can go to another tab, and I added this tab, and I just called it Who's Hot, because I didn't really know what to call it. And this is really kind of cool in my opinion. So literally just a chart that, up the y-axis we have salary, across the x-axis we have average fantasy points. So this is for the whole length of the season. And what you're looking for are players who are very far to the right, which is average fantasy points, and not as high in salary, right? Those are values. Those are guys who are outplaying their value. So you'll see DeMarcus Cousins averaging 61.5 DraftKings points at an average salary of just over 11,000. Visually, that's very easy to see that that's better than, Giannis has been great, but better than Anthony Davis, who is basically the same salary or just a little bit cheaper and only averaging 47 points per game. Like you can see, LeBron James is a significant outlier here. Players down here, Sabonis, averaging 32 points and only a $4,700 salary. Like he's outpacing all of these players who are his peers in price range in his fantasy production. Fournier, same thing. Otto Porter Jr., Chris Middleton, Andre Drummond. Like you want guys on the right side of this chart. Hassan Whiteside, unfortunately, averaging 23.5 DraftKings points at an $8,000 salary is not great. You can see there's guys who are much cheaper who are averaging much better fantasy productions. What I love about this is, again, as the season goes on, we're going to get more data and we're going to be able to do a lot cooler things. So here's a smaller sample, but here's like the last week. You can see Dame Lillard jumps out. Ben Simmons. Here's Chris Middleton because he had a big game. Tim Hardaway Jr. because he had a big game. Guys on the wrong side of this, again, still Hassan Whiteside. Blake Griffin's on the wrong side of this. LaMarcus Aldridge on the wrong side of it. So, you could really look at any 2-week period or something like that over the course of the season and see guys who are outperforming not only their peers, but potentially their price range. And I like to call it Who's Hot because I don't think you should use the whole season as an example. I think you should use little snippets, whatever you want, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, to get an idea of who's outplaying their salary at the moment. And actually, while I'm talking about this, other tabs too, like here's the game logs. Okay, I also have last year's game logs in here, right? Like if you really wanted to see every game from last year, there's a ton of them. And then I have like this projection. So if you build your own spreadsheet, this is something I offer or have offered in the past where I send you a version of the Google Sheets, and then you can update it with these numbers. So if you're looking for those projection components, they're right here. I get asked on Twitter all the time. They're on the third tab of the game logs data tool. Okay, that's where they're at. All right, let's flip over to the game logs. This is, this is very much raw data, but I do like to look at this every day. I think it's worth a peek. So let's talk through this sheet as well. All right, so here you go. Game logs, literally every game played by every player in the league. Very cool little chart that I just like to see update daily in the top right-hand corner, the top 10 games, fantasy games for players each season, but there's a lot more to this. So fairly data heavy, but things like I just mentioned, okay, the Lakers are really bad at defending point guards. What I can come in here and do is I can choose any position and just find the point guards against the Lakers very simply, and then I can sort, just by date here, and how quickly I can run through the entire stat lines for a player, the salary, how many fantasy points that they scored. I mean, you can see on back-to-back nights, Dame Lillard scored 47 points against the Lakers. D'Angelo Russell dropped 40. Even Spencer Dinwiddie, in only 14 minutes or nearly 15 minutes, scored 20 DraftKings points. So what you're seeing here is a very apparent trend that this is a position that the Lakers have trouble stopping. So this is the ability for me to come in here and identify these things. Now, I think more handy, and as the season goes on, this chart becomes more and more valuable because we're going to get the opportunity to do things like, this might be tough with this early in the season, but let's do this. I'm just going to choose Dame Lillard, and okay, there is I could see what Dame did against Phoenix, okay, which I think is kind of cool. So, of course, it's early in the season. Teams haven't played each other multiple times too often. But what you're going to start to see here is like, oh man, wow, okay, every time Dame plays Phoenix, he goes nuts or something like that, right? So you can easily go back and find those matchups. Or if you knew games where Anthony Davis, doesn't play, let's go see what DeMarcus Cousins does during those games. So you can, easily be able to go and identify that. You can sort by, we can get rid of Phoenix here. We can just do home and away games. So here's Dame Lillard at home. I can flip to his FanDuel numbers pretty easily here. If I was looking for, tremendous value, I can just clear out some of these, and I can just say, okay, I only want to see game logs for guys who are under, I can either type it in or I can use the slider, $5,500. And these will all update, and now I can sort by, best fantasy games for, under $5,500, something like that, right? So I think you can get pretty creative here. The longer the season goes on, the more valuable this becomes to me. And then, of course, since it is a long season, I mean, you can always just change the date range to anything you want, the last 2 weeks, the last month, whatever that ends up being. But I think this is a really valuable tool that will only get more valuable as the season continues to go along. After that, I would probably go to, let's see, let's do player profile. We'll just keep going in order here. Player profiles I like a lot. Okay. So now what I can do is identify a specific player. So right now I've got it defaulted just to start with Al Horford because he's near the top of the alphabet, and I know he has a bunch of games here. But really, this is your opportunity to choose any one player, and probably recommend just looking at one at a time, or else this isn't going to make much sense. But let's go to Russell. And now you can kind of see different trends here. So just to kind of walk through this, down here, actually, now that I'm looking at this, I know that these two, or this fantasy points number, I'll have to adjust that. He obviously is not averaging 411 DraftKings points. So I'll have that fixed before you see this video. But here you can see, here's all his games. I can hover over them and get, the opponent. So first game of the year against the Knicks, 59 DraftKings points, he was $11,000. And, you can see this black trend line representing his salary. You can see his fantasy outputs here was 71 points against Indy. The red are the away games. The green are the home games. So you can kind of see that trend as well. Here you can see his most recent games, just at a very quick peek here. Okay, there's his most recent games. This looks a little bit like Christmas. I might have to change these colors around, but a very handy tool for me to be able to go in and see how a player is trending, right? So someone maybe not as usually great as Russ, right? Like, let's find someone with maybe different salary trends. Like Aaron Gordon might be a good one because here we go. So Aaron Gordon, he has a massive 65-point game. Then what happens to his salary? Well, the next night it was already out, right? So he actually dropped after that game, and then you see, boom, jumps it back up to 7,500 after 2 nights. So this is kind of interesting. And again, as the season goes on, this is going to become more and more valuable. All right, just 2 more tools here for now. Here is like the full defense versus position chart. So we saw this on the cheat sheet, but here's kind of like a more in-depth version of it, if you will. Again, I can go with any date range. So as we get more data, it doesn't make sense to use the whole season as your data set. But for now, we can do it. So say I just want to see like who's giving up the most points to opposing centers. Well, it's Atlanta, and they're getting shredded. You can see pretty significantly more than the rest of the league. But what's cool about this is I have the game logs on the right. And then what I can do is I can click on any one of these teams. So here's Atlanta, and now here are every center who has faced Atlanta in my time frame. So it goes back to the beginning of the year with Nerlens Noel, and then here's Clint Capella, who is the last center to take on Atlanta. So very easy to be able to click through here and just see those game logs in full, which I think is pretty handy. So I added that feature in, and just kind of another way to look through those game logs and add more data and kind of see what's actually happening here. So I really like that one a lot. All right, and the last one here, I call this team usage, and this is the tool by far that people are like, Rick, what is happening here? And there's a lot, and it's pretty fluid. It's something that I conjured up in my brain and I tried to put on paper here because it's something that I wanted to know, right? Like these are the tools that I make are trying to answer questions that I have. So I like to look at a player or find players that dominate their team's usage, essentially, right? So let's just do this. So just like the player profile where I recommend that you choose one player, I recommend you choose one team here. So let's start with my Philadelphia 76ers. And just when I click this, I can see up here in the top right, like this is average fantasy points. So Joel Embiid averaging 42.8 DraftKings points is essentially 15.6% of all the Sixers points. Okay, so that's kind of step one of what we need to understand here. Then what I like to do, and I mean, we saw this a lot with the Sixers last year, especially at the center position. So let's just do that. I can choose, well, that was probably a bad example. Let's do centers and forwards and power forwards, which, by the way, if you hold control, you can select multiple items. So here we go. So now if we just look at centers, forwards, or power forwards, essentially big men, we have a better idea of who's taking usage across the rest of this team. It's on a pie chart up top, but then over time down below. So you can see how players really compare against each other for the course of some specific period of time. Maybe I can do point guards here. Let me see if I can find a better example. Here we go. So here's point guards and technically guards. So TJ McConnell, Ben Simmons. But what I would like to use this for are when players go out for injury. So there was a time last year, and I don't know if I have it here for last year. Okay, let's do the Sixers for last year at center. Okay, here we go. So you can see, so this must have been in February here when Joel Embiid went out. And you can see after that, Okafor was pretty volatile, but was pretty good after that. If we throw in forwards, we get a lot of... okay, here's Dario. Dario's this brownish one. So you can see basically after Joel went out, it was the Dario Saric show. And that's good to know, right? Because you can not very easily see, but just kind of look at the brown one here. He was not having any games like this when Embiid was playing. So this is something that I think is still definitely a work in progress. I like the idea of it. The execution might be lacking a little bit, so give me some time to work on this. But you can see where my thought process is going. I'm looking for players who take the lion's share of their team's usage. I'm trying to be able to compare it over time so I can see specific parts of the season when maybe someone was out or maybe a player really turns a corner. So those are the types of questions that I'm trying to answer. with this tool. So that's the team usage tool, and that's all the tools that I have available on DFS On Demand right now. I'm constantly trying to improve them. I'm constantly trying to come up with new ones. So if there are any that you're interested in, you think could need improvement, or you have questions that you want answered, tweet me. It's at dfsondemand.com. You can leave a comment below. You can email me through the website. Any way you want to get in touch with me. But I hope that kind of gives you an idea of what I'm looking for on a daily basis and how I go about using these tools. So best of luck with everyone, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya.